Welcome back in, everybody, to a Wednesday edition of Birds 365. Just one day away from the NFL draft, about 34 hours and 36 minutes until we kick off round one of the NFL draft. We're joined now by Brandon Lee Gowton, BLG of Bleeding Green Nation. Give him a follow at Brandon Gowton and read all his work at bleedinggreennation.com. BLG, how you doing on this Wednesday, brother? One day out from the draft.
I'm doing good, guys. I'm excited to see what happens here on Thursday night.
All right, we're going to pin you down right away. I'm going to give you three options, BLG. Trade up scenario, who's that player for the Philadelphia Eagles? Forced to stay put at 32, who's that player? And targeted trade down, who's that player for BLG?
Like this. From the jump. I think trade up, and I also think trade up is maybe the most likely thing the Eagles can do on Thursday night, just because if the discourse about this draft class en masse seems to be true about teams not necessarily being in love with these players. I think Howie Roseman, as we've seen in the past, typically really has a tier of players that he likes to, get from, and there's a big drop off after that. And I think there are going to be opportunities to move up. Obviously, the Minnesota Vikings are kind of like the landing spot there at number 24, considering they only have the 4 picks in this draft, and the Eagles are flush with picks to move up. So that seems like a natural pairing. I'll say I have a hard time Walter Nolan is going to fall to that point. But if there's a chance he is in around that area, I think, that is the kind of player you're looking for at a move up there at 24. At 32, that's a hard one. I think the one at 32 is hard for the standpoint of we even did a mock draft at SB Nation with all the writers from each team blog. And, we weren't doing trades as much. And I made the pick at 32. I was like, I really didn't love the board there. I took Gray Zabel. I don't think he's going to make it there based on what we've seen since about everything that's saying about his value. I think you're looking at someone maybe like Donovan Ezeraku there, let's say. And then if it's a trade back, maybe it's more of like a Nick Scorton at that point, and I think it'd be a smaller kind of trade back.
I like it. I think Nick Scorton's a safe prospect. That's who I would focus on. But I'm too safe. I give the Eagles credit. They're a lot more willing to take chances than me. And I think everything I hear, BLG, the whispers coming to me, they want a trade space guy. So I'm focusing on Walter Nolan, and I get it from the standpoint of everybody thinks everybody's the same. So you might as well go with the high ceiling. So 20 to 50 is same. Walter Nolan, Stewart, high, and I keep hearing Oladeo, the UCLA edge rusher, and that guy. It would not surprise me if he's one of those surprise first round picks from everything I hear around the NFL. Not just the Eagles, like a lot of teams like him, and I wouldn't touch him till the 3rd round. I said earlier because he's 1 year off-ball linebacker, then they move him out the edge rusher. But we've seen that in the past, and it's worked.
So also a Vic Fangio type of player.
I think everybody's a Vic Fangio type of player. Did you see Josh? I should have mentioned that Josh Shapiro. Did you see his interview?
I saw some of it. I didn't watch the whole thing.
That was great. By the way, the governor did a good job.
Yeah,
and I got a kick out of because he asked Vic at one point if he could come up with a plan to stop Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley. And Vic do it every day at practice, basically.
And he wasn't like smiling or he wasn't kidding either.
He's like, yeah, I do it every day at practice. So anyway, for those who want to see that interview, it's on the governor's YouTube page, I think. But anyway, he did a good job. So I forgot to mention that. Back to the draft, though.
Well, he also said in there, I like good players. They make me look smart. So,
exactly. Yeah. I think it's more of a thing in the secondary, though, than up front. Like, I think he just wants good players up front, and they'll figure it out. The secondary, and that's where guys like Malachi Starks and I've heard they're interested in Barron, but I don't. The Jahdae Barron from Texas, and you think about Quinyon Mitchell last year. What the difference between Quinyon Mitchell and Terrion Arnold? Quinyon came in with the off coverage rep, and that's what Big does.
Mm-hmm.
All those different zones. So I think it's a bigger thing in the secondary than up front. And I just think they want a defensive front player, and they want a guy with a high upside. That's where I think the Eagles are.
Yeah, it's tough this year in terms of like these past 4 years or so. We've kind of, I feel like, had a good sense of what was going to go down. Obviously, as they were higher up the board.
Yeah.
Even in after the year after they lost the Super Bowl, because they had the pick from the Saints. And then even the pick they made at 30 that year, Nolan Smith, that was kind of something that was very much on the radar, and people thought, including myself, might even happen at 10 in that draft.
Same here. I thought that, yeah.
So this year, I feel like we're just not hearing as much. And obviously part of that, I think, is okay, so we've heard some rumors they like Gray Zabel, for example, but again, I don't think he's going to make it there. Or Walter Nolan, don't think he's going to make it there. So it's kind of hard to totally forecast that. I feel like some of the names, I'm hearing that could be more realistic. Like you hear about like Mason Taylor, which would seem like a little bit of a surprise if it's at 32. Maybe that's a trade down. Scorton, it's just it's less concrete than it has been in previous years.
BLG, how do you view this tight end situation in Philly right now? They're keeping it close to the vest. I've been following on bleedinggreennation.com the top 30 visit tracker. Still no tight end listed. The owner, when he spoke about Dallas Goedert, basically clumped him in with CJ Gardner-Johnson, who is gone. So I'm like, is Goddard gone? Like, how do you view this whole situation? And then, just to follow it up, when will they address this? Do you think they take a player in the second round, third round? How do you see this playing with the tight end in Philly?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting in terms of the timing of this maneuver. I think you can look at the draft two different ways in terms of, number one, if a team doesn't get, the tight end that they like, then okay, all of a sudden maybe they're more willing to make a deal with the Eagles. I think the Colts are like a team to watch and have been a team to watch in that regard. On the flip side, if the teams that do want tight ends do get tight ends, then maybe there isn't a market for Dallas Goedert. And maybe the Eagles wouldn't hate that in the sense that they can come back to him and be like, hey, there really now is really no market for you. No one wants to trade for you. Everyone took a tight end or whatever. So maybe the best situation here is we figure out how to make this work for one more year, like the Eagles did with Josh Sweat last year. Maybe that's a little too pie in the sky. Maybe that ship has sailed. But until Goddard's gone, I'm going to assume there's at least some kind of possibility that the two sides make it work together. Although I don't think that is necessarily the most likely outcome based on what we've heard to this point. But my whole thing, with the Eagles and their future with Dallas Goedert or lack thereof has been like they don't have a clear kind of replacement plan in place. So maybe that changes, through the draft. But it is weird, as you pointed out, Zander, like they haven't had a pre-draft visit. I don't think that means they will not take a tight end. And again, hearing still rumors of interest in different tight ends. And we don't know literally every pre-draft visit that they've had. Right. So it's possible they could have had some in there. But it's weird that we haven't heard any.
We got 24, 25, 30.
Close.
So it's a small range that there could be a tight end there.
Mm-hmm. You know what's strange to me about Dallas Goedert? If he were like playing somewhere else, and he had the same career, which wouldn't happen, but just for this exercise, and you say, all right, he's 30 years old, he's kind of expensive, where would his fits be? You would look at, well, it's probably a contender that needs a tight end. Like, I don't think there's a better fit in the NFL for Dallas Goedert than Philadelphia.
Right.
Literally. And I find it very hard to believe that the Eagles don't want him. So I almost, from that standpoint, when I look about it, I think it's almost got to be more. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't think they want to give him multiple years and a bunch of extra money, but just in the short term. So I think it's got to be more Dallas's side from that. When I look at it from that perspective, agree or disagree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I think if, Dallas Goedert is willing, more than totally willing to come back on his current deal, I don't think the Eagles are no. Like I don't think that is the hard line in the sand that they're drawing. I think it's more of like Dallas Goedert's camp, like you said, is kind of wants more security, and the Eagles are like, no, that's not going to work. We will honor the contract. Again, I don't know the full details of the conversation, but that seems to be more of where the issue would arise. I don't think ideally the Eagles would want to pay what Goddard is making this year, but I think again, there's a way to maybe make that work or finagle that a little bit from their end. But yeah, it's a weird situation. But again, will be really interesting to see how we learn more about this situation and also the Jordan Davis situation too. With the 5th-year option deadline looming here in just like a week or two on May 2nd, we're going to find out more about the outlook of a lot of players on this roster.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I think it might be answered, BLG, after the draft. Like if they draft that Tyleek Williams, the guy that they brought in, a 330-pound guy, nose tackle, true run stopper. I think Jordan Davis is as good as gone, but that is a complicated contract set up with Jordan Davis. But, I brought this up, and I want to bring this up to both you guys, actually. I brought this up. I saw a graph or a social media chart the other day, and it was listing out the run-heavy versus pass-heavy teams and in 2024 regular season. The top 6 run-heavy teams last year were the Eagles 1, 55%, Ravens 2, 52%, Green Bay 3, 51%, and then Steelers, Lions, and Bills all 49, 48, 47%. Then you have the 6 pass heaviest teams. You had Bengals, Browns, Raiders, Jets, Seahawks, and Cowboys. Now, 6 teams on the left who are run teams are playoff teams. The 6 teams on the right who are pass teams were not playoff teams. I'm not saying that's a perfect indicator. I understand that they pass more when you're losing games and all of those things, but I think because of that, they like Jordan Davis. They want to be able to stop the run, and I think you're going to start seeing the resurgence of the running back continue just because of the undersized defensive players. But I think they're going to keep Jordan Davis for that reason. Do you think they'll pay Jordan Davis the $18 million a year it might be?
You know what's really funny? I saw a clip the Eagles put out yesterday with Howie Roseman where he's like answering questions. They kind of have done that with other, like I know Vic Fangio did
that with Vic. Yeah, Vic dropped the cards when he did.
yeah, he's not shy to skip a lot of the questions.
Yeah,
I think Howie did too, some of them. But anyway, maybe I'm making too much of this, but my radar, like my antenna went off on this one where they ended the video in that clip. Howie Roseman, he's like talking about how much he loves the draft and like drafting good players. And there's a clip of him, like as that is being said, holding up the jersey with Jordan Davis from after they just drafted him. And again, maybe I'm making too much of that, a little too conspiracy brained here. Obviously, Howie himself isn't making that video, but like, I don't know. That just kind of, that kind of interested me. And again, as I've kind of, what I lean on here is that I just don't think Howie wants to, and you just look at his track record, by the way, he is not like quick to give up on draft picks. And it has to be, they have to be like, I think pretty obviously terrible for him to move on. And even then, you could say they stayed a little bit longer than they really should have. So I just don't think, I don't know what they're going to do with Jordan Davis, but I don't think it's as simple as like, oh, he doesn't like him anymore. I don't think it's that simple.
Yeah, well, I think if we're up to Howie, Bryce Huff would be a big part of the conversation, but I don't know if Vic will permit it. But to Zander's original point, I'm champing. I'm like, because I hear that all the time. That's the correlation causation argument. I mean, in the history of the NFL, the good teams run the ball more because they're ahead late, and that now. There's context to it because the Eagles were a very run-heavy team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
The Ravens are a very run-heavy team purposefully because they're good at it. But every single year, the best teams have that are skewed at the top in the run-pass ratio, and the worst teams are skewed at the bottom because they're always behind, and you can't run the ball when you're behind. Drives me nuts, BLG. Anyway. I just wanted to.
No, you're right, John. That context is certainly important. But the other thing is, like, I'll ask you, BLG, and John, you can respond too. Do you think the running game is going to make a resurgence? Not that it ever went like completely away, but I do think with Saquon, some of the draft picks that have happened with running backs, you're talking about another one who might be a top 10 pick this year. And then the other side is, defense has gotten so small. Edge rushers are smaller. Linebackers are smaller. Like, I think the natural pendulum is just going to swing to favor guys who can bully you off the ball like the Eagles did all last year. Do you see that happen in BLG in the NFL, or is that too far-fetched?
No, to some extent, I think that's absolutely true. I don't think it's like night and day. And even if that does swing that way, I don't think that's going to be forever because, everything course corrects itself, especially in the NFL at some point. But I do think, we've leaned a little bit more that way than people would have expected, is what I would say, in the year 2025. I think people, did not, I think we just saw pass happy league for so many years, and we kind of figured that's just what the NFL is now entirely. And it still is by and large, but this past year seemed to be a little bit less of that given the context of other years.
Flip that on the other side, because everyone sees that as a big advantage for the Eagles, and it certainly was offensively last year, the whole bully ball mindset. Somebody on the other side going to figure out how light the Eagles are on the edge? At some point, do they need to get some size on the defensive side of the football?
I will say Nolan's pretty good against the run for being an undersized.
Right.
Yeah. He was better against the run at Georgia than he was as a pass rusher.
I think that's instinct right there. Yeah.
And you see some of these like crushing hits he has. He had one obviously in the Packers game. That was Elgton Jenkins he knocked out.
Yeah, he's a good player too.
And in the Super Bowl too. Trey Smith, like same thing early in the game.
Yeah, Kelsey was Travis was raving about Nolan Smith.
He's not big the measurables wise, but he plays like very bigger than he is. And Jalen Hunt's not like he's not small, he's not huge, he's not hulking, he's not massive for an edge rusher. But I wouldn't.
Well, I always say BLG, he's got the frame to add weight. I'm interested to see him.
Mm-hmm.
And how much, because he was a safety at Cornell, and he's already 250.
But you do see that a lot where guys come into the league and they like really bulk up over the first couple of years. Like I could see that with him. That picture of him next to BLJ, or not BLJ, Brandon Graham, BG. Brandon Graham, it was funny to me. I'm like, whoa, I didn't realize Jalix was that much bigger than BG, but he is definitely taller. Now, will he fill out? That's the question.
Yeah, I do think it's a valid point in terms of like it feels like they have to add like a little bit, especially when you lose Brandon Graham, right? Like because Brandon Graham has more of that traditional defensive end mold. Even Josh Sweat, like a bigger guy, a little bit lean in some ways, but still has like that length and size. At least height-wise.
Maybe that's where Nick Scorton makes sense, BLG. John and I have talked about him a lot.
Yeah. He has that build, I guess, more so. He's still not like huge in terms of edge rusher. You look at like his mock draftable chart is 21 percentile height, 33 percentile weight. So he's bigger than Nolan Smith, but certainly by comparison. I do think they would like to add a little bit more size ideally.
Yeah, he's not James Pierce though. James Pierce is
he's a defensive back out there. It looks like I can't get over that.
All right, full disclosure at 32. Because I hate picking. I don't know about you, BLG, but when I only do one mock draft, Eagles only, and I only do one 32 first round, that'll come out today. But I hate projecting trade. It's just so dumb. There's no, I don't know who's going to trade where. So I just try to put guys in where they might go.
Mm-hmm.
And 32, here's my conspiracy theory. 32, I want Stewart because I think the Eagles want a trade space prospect. I think he might go 9, he might go 11, but he also might fall to 32. So I picked him. Now, the Eagles brought in Scorton and they brought in Shamar Turner, a bunch of Shamars down there, Texas A&M. My conspiracy theory is they brought them in to find out more about Stewart. Subterfuge or my off the reservation?
I don't think there's 0% chance they talked about Shamar Stewart. I don't think that's totally unrelated, especially how they've talked about in the past the cohabitation matrix.
Yes, good poll.
Bringing it back and leaning in different ways to find information on these guys, because that to me is the most the biggest kind of hole in the NFL draft media lead up complex, like the character stuff like that. To me, that's like almost what matters most to me. And it's not, I mean, obviously you have to have some threshold of talent and production and athleticism, sure. But at the end of the day, like how, and just, I didn't always feel this way, but seeing over the years about certain players who didn't make it, I think some of them, I'm not going to slander them here, but I think you can kind of figure out who they are. Like that drive to be great. It can't be the only thing, but it's a big part of the equation, and it's so hard. Like, how do you can watch film? You can be one of these, and I love the guys who watch, and ladies and whoever who watch film and give their analysis. I think that's a great tool to have. But if you're not pairing it with like how driven are they to be great, like that's a big part of the puzzle that's missing.
Yeah, I'm with you. I said it before you came on today. I said there's two things. I said that, and then the health stuff and the medical stuff. That, like DK Metcalf, the Eagles got killed. Why didn't you take that? He was all, they weren't gonna. He was off the board. He was medically. He was not medically. He was a medical red flag. They wouldn't have considered him until day 3. We have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea on the medical stuff and what you're saying. We don't have Dom to go down and try to figure out what's going on with some of these people. But in the case of Stewart, I think it's more about, all right, he's this phenomenal athlete. He's got everything you need from a trade standpoint, but he had no production in college. So I think you bring in Scorton and you bring in Shamar Turner and you say, what were you doing? What were you trying to accomplish? Why is this guy not producing? Because he should be a top 10 level pick from an athleticism standpoint. Could be way off the reservation, but
I'm subscribing to your conspiracy there, John. I think you're on to something.
I like it as a conspiracy. I think it's a valid, possible conspiracy.
Well, there's also a similar thing that happened with the Georgia defense, right? Where those guys were great players, but not everybody was productive in that defense. Well, productive, but not, maybe show up on stat sheet productive just because of the way the defense were. I think that's pretty interesting there, Johnny Mac. Good stuff.
All right. Good. I was expecting you to laugh at me and put on the tinfoil hat, but I'll take it.
Yeah. BLJ, is there any guys in this draft, in this top, that you really don't want to see the Eagles select, that you're just like, please don't take that guy. It'll be a travesty, or in your opinion, it would be. Any guys like that for you in this draft?
Yeah, I think that's kind of a good way to frame it. I think I actually kind of have a better idea of like who I don't think the Eagles will / I don't want the Eagles. I don't think they should take than I really do this year. More of like last few years, again, like kind of really pounding the table for a certain player and feeling like this really makes sense. Less of that this year, but more of like, no, they're not going to take that guy, or I don't see them taking that guy. James Pierce Jr. up there for me. Like, again, he just looks like a defensive back. And I just can't see Vic Fangio, like, especially after we lived through the Bryce Huff experience, like loving that guy. Like, I struggle to see that happening. I also think, like, if he falls to the Eagles, like, what does that say? Like, about, not to, obviously, like, they're going to have to take someone. So, like, there's reasons every player is going to fall. But, like, a player with this kind of production, like, I just think there's more holes in his game than, like, you really love to be taking at that point. If a player with the production and things he has going for him falls, I think that's like a big red flag, basically, more so than other players if they fell. So I think he doesn't make sense. That's probably the big one for me. I just don't even see it happening.
It's interesting because he was so productive in college.
Yeah.
Now, the thing I don't like about the tape is that he just blows by everybody. So when you get to the NFL and your first move doesn't work, what's that second, third, fourth pass rush move look like? That would be my big question with him. But boy, he was productive, BLJ.
So was Derek Barnett, and it's different. And
I was about to ask you, is there any Derek Barnett spilling over? Because he was so productive. He broke Reggie White's sack records, BLG.
Yeah, 33 sacks at Tennessee, 10, 10, and 13. Like, and he was also pretty young too at the time.
Yeah.
Younger than the average. But yeah, and Pierce had 19 and a half.
Yeah.
Not bad, but not like so otherworldly that like you have to take that guy. And yeah, I don't love the profile with him. So that's a buyer beware for me.
All right, so who's the BLG guy? Not Howie, not what you think Howie's going to do. Who's the player in the best case scenario? And it might be the same, but who's the player you want more than anybody else? And it doesn't have to be a 32. It could be trade up, trade down. who's the BLG guy.
Yeah, it's definitely, I'm going to go chalk with this and say Walter Nolan. But again, I don't think it's going to happen. I'm sure you guys may have seen Peter Schrager's mock draft today that he did, and Walter Nolan's going to the 49ers at 11.
Yeah,
well, that's great. Yeah, I've seen Walter go as high as 9, and I only look at. I'm not talking about people are doing mock drafts on PFF or Pro Football Network. I'm reputable guys, not that anybody's not reputable, but guys who have an understanding of the league. That's generally the only mock drafts I'll take a look at occasionally. And I've seen Nolan as high as 9 and as low as 32, and Stewart as high as 9 and as low as 32. It's crazy. Can you remember the wild ranges of these prospects in this draft? Certain guys who may be top 10 and may fall to the Eagles at 32. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, it feels especially, like relevant this year with the Eagles being so far back and then having to account for all these different possibilities that either could happen very realistically or just not even be in the ballpark of what will be happening on Thursday night. So it's been weird to parse through. Looking at here that Daniel Jeremiah's top 150, like players I love. Again, I think Gray Zabel would make a lot of sense for this team.
He's a good player.
And maybe even a trade up at some point if the Eagles feel like okay, this is our right guard right now. He obviously has tackle experience. Maybe you can if he doesn't work out there or something, or you need to shift in the future. I feel like you have optionality with him. I feel like you can find the spot.
Yeah, he's got some Zach Martin. He can play anywhere.
Yeah, he's interesting. He's a very Eaglesy pick. The thing I love about the range on all these players is that dumb teams make dumb decisions every draft. But like with the subjectivity increasing in this draft, I think you're going to have an even higher chance or a higher rate of dumb decisions by teams, which will favor the Eagles, obviously sitting at 32. But that will be interesting. BLG, my last question for you here, brother, and we appreciate you doing it on this Wednesday. Make sure you guys follow BLG at Brandon Gowton and read all his work at Bleeding Green Nation. Truly one of the best Eagles websites out there. BLG, I'm always interested in the NFC East. All right, you got the Giants at 3, you got the Cowboys at 12, you got the Commanders at 29. Just kind of can rapid fire through them, but where do you see each of those teams kind of going in this NFL draft?
Yeah, Giants really interesting, obviously. What they do early seems to be that they are going to take Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, depending, and I would think Carter.
I'm hoping Travis Hunter fall. I don't know about you, but I don't want to see Abdul Carter in Giants blue.
Yeah, it's not really ideal, but as long as the Giants don't have a quarterback, I think the Eagles will be okay. That's how I felt last year when they took Malik Neighbors. Everyone's like, "Oh, Malik Neighbors is awesome," and sure, he is, but it doesn't matter if they don't have a quarterback. So I think they're going to go that direction, then probably try to somehow get a quarterback at the top of the second round, or maybe trade up at some point. Whether that's Shadur Sanders, Jackson Dart seems to be the name that's gaining a little bit more steam there. We'll see that. Cowboys kind of like that could be not a great outcome for the Eagles, depending on what happens there. If Ashton Genty falls to them, if they're able to get Tech McMillan, I'm
not a Ted McMillan guy at all. You're
all
tall,
right.
So maybe you like Ted.
That's right.
You're very tall.
I'm biased.
But I just don't like guys who can't separate. Like he's going to make some great catches, but if you can't separate consistently, I hear the Mike Evans comparisons. I'm like, I see Laquan Treadwell. That's what I see. But I could be completely wrong. I would be thrilled if the Cowboys, if I were an Eagles fan, I'd be thrilled if the Cowboys took Ted McMillan. But go on, Washington. Sorry.
Yeah, then Washington, that could be a really interesting pick since they're so close to the Eagles. I think there's really potential there for like, oh, this player is still on the board. They're still on the board. And the Eagles kind of get like sniped there by Washington, assuming they don't trade up. And I think that's all the more reason maybe to trade up so you make sure you don't get sniped by Washington there. I think, that the Commanders pick could have the potential to kind of like ruin the Eagles draft night a little bit.
I could see that.
And I think they need an edge rusher too. There. So that could really affect the Eagles because I think one of the spots they're looking at is going to be edge rusher. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see it being a pissing match. Eagles go to 28, Commanders go to 26 or something like that. I could see that happening. BLG, thank you, brother. Something I learned in this segment, BLG, with you today is that not only when I fumbled and said LG instead of BG, speaking of Brandon Graham, not only do you have the initials of BG together, but his middle name is Lee. So it's Brandon Lee Graham. And then here we have Brandon Lee Gowton. I did not know that. That's pretty cool. So BLG and BLG are a big part of the Eagles organization and team. So good stuff, BLG. We appreciate you, brother. And we'll talk to you next week, hopefully after a great NFL draft this weekend.
Real quick, I've talked to him about that to verify, because you see stuff in like Wikipedia or whatever.
Yeah,
like, is that true?
Yeah.
And I asked him, and he's like, yeah. And I showed him my initials, and he was like, awesome. So there we go.
And there you go. Good confirmation. BLJ, appreciate you, brother. We'll talk to you next week.
See you.
Thanks, bud.
BLJ. Good stuff from BLG.